Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Rob Bruss.
And I'm Ed Anderson.
G'day, Ed. How you doing today, mate?
Pretty good, Robbie. How you doing down there?
Yeah, I'm really well, man. I've got the daily dose of doom and gloom all locked and loaded for us, and I'm looking forward to seeing the unspoken truth behind the worst economic times ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, this is what Ed and I do. We like to look at the mainstream media. We like to look at the story that's behind that narrative and what's actually going on. We'd like to invite you to come on over and follow us on Telegram, as a podcast on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app, even over on Apple Podcast. And you can reach us on Twitter as well if you want to reach out and have a chat. But don't forget to like, subscribe, and add some comments down here below. We need to brace ourselves in these very uncertain economic times, and it seems to me that every other day there's some other doom and gloom, doomsday news coming out about one thing or another to do with the economy. We had some doom and gloom doomsday here in Australia yesterday with the announcement of a new Reserve Bank governor, but that's a topic for another day. One of the things that's coming for you, ladies and gentlemen, and one of the things that will happen with your social credit score is the tax man is coming for you. And your taxes are going to go through the roof. And this is the beginning of the end of the fiat system, as you know. It's going to be a controlled demolition of our economy. It's not going to be something that just happens as a black swan event. It may happen like that. And if that is the case, then it will accelerate. But Ed, why don't you take us through what you've got and what are your opening remarks today?
Yeah, so this really is not surprising news because this is what we have been predicting here on our show for quite a while. So what I'm going to be showing people today in my report is pretty much so there's a reason why we say what we say. We don't just make things up. We just don't pull things out of the air. And but today's news is evidence of the things that we've been talking about. But it does represent a milestone event that is significant that people should be aware of. So should we just get right into the report, or?
Yeah, let's take well, before you do that, I want to, I think that's a really important term that you actually said there, milestone. When you think of projects, it depends on what you do for a job, right? I worked in project management for a very long time in the IT space, where you're either building somebody's website or their ad campaign or something to do with helping their business grow. And I would always insert milestones along the way. And when the government is in a controlled demolition of the economy, they have milestones as well. And it's a project that somebody's running. There's somebody running the project team, and there's project managers in there, and there's people implementing these particular things. And if this is a milestone that we're bumping up against, this is something that you definitely need to pay attention to, ladies and gentlemen. So let's take a little looky-loo at this report.
Okay, so welcome back. So as you know here, I try to keep you abreast of very important economic news so that you're armed and you're prepared and you can take advantage of it so you don't have to be a victim. And today we hit an economic milestone that you're not going to hear about in the mainstream media, but I am going to tell you about it here. So let's get right into it. Okay, so for the first time ever, the interest payments on our debt are about to exceed $1 trillion. Let's go to an article out of Zero Hedge. End the game. U.S. federal debt interest payments about to hit $1 trillion. There was a shocking number in today's latest monthly U.S. budget deficit report. No, it wasn't that U.S. government outlays unexpectedly soared 15% to $646 billion in June, up almost $100 billion from a year ago, while tax receipts slumped 9.2% from $461 billion to $418 billion, resulting in a TTM government receipt drop of over 7.3%, the biggest number since June 2020, when the U.S. was reeling from the worldwide flu lockdown recession. In fact, never before have tax receipts suffered such a big drop without the U.S. entering a recession. Okay, newsflash, despite what the government is telling you, we are in a recession, okay? Now, these people. But let's pause for a second and talk about what we just read. So the money we're bringing in from tax receipts are going down dramatically at the same time that our expenditures are going up dramatically. All right, let's continue. And here's a chart of our tax receipts. See, year over year, our tax receipts have declined 7.3%. Needless to say, surging government outlays coupled with shrinking tax revenues meant that in June, the U.S. budget deficit nearly tripled from 89 billion a year ago to 228 billion, far greater than the consensus estimate of 175 billion. And I like this line. One can only imagine which Ukrainian billionaire oligarch's money laundering bank account is currently enjoying the benefit of that unexpected incremental $50 billion US debt deficit hole. We know for a fact that the FBI will never get to the bottom of that one, since they can't even figure out who dumped a bunch of below inside of the White House. Yeah, I've been telling you, there are people getting really rich off of this Ukrainian-Russian war. And with the monthly deficits coming in higher than expected and also far higher than a year ago, it is also not at all surprising that the cumulative deficit 9 months into the fiscal year is already the third highest on record, surpassed only by the crisis years of 2020 and 2021. Again, while sad, none of the above numbers are surprising. They merely confirm that the U.S. is on an ever faster track to fiscal death, but not before the Fed is forced to monetize the debt once again. One wonders what financial crisis the Jekyll Island folks will invoke this time to greenlight the next multi-trillion-dollar QE. As bad as the above numbers are, now we get to the really bad part. No, the one number that was truly shocking was found all the way on page 9, deep inside table 3 of the latest Treasury monthly statement, the only highlighted below, and which shows that in the 9 months of the current fiscal year, the U.S. has already accumulated a record $650 billion in gross debt interest. Soaring interest rates driven by the panicked Fed's scramble to undo its epic policy failure of 2020 and 2021, when the Fed kept rates at zero for far too long while injecting trillions into various asset bubbles, have been the key driver of the deficit, with the Federal Reserve boosting its benchmark rate by 5% since it began hiking in March last year. 5-year Treasury yields are now at 3.96% versus 1.3% at the start of last year. Okay, let's jump down here. That would mean a complete disaster for the U.S., and it would mean that the interest payments on the total U.S. debt of $32.3 trillion would hit $1.3 trillion within 12 months, potentially making interest on the debt the single biggest U.S. government expenditure and surpassing Social Security. Okay, there is more that I would love to say about this because it goes on and on and on. But in the spirit of respecting your time, let's just cut to the chase. Tax receipts are down, our debt is up, interest rates are up, so the payments on our interest rate is up dramatically. And within a year, it's going to cost us more just to service the interest on our national debt than it is to cover all of Social Security. So the moral of all this is you have to get prepared. Get your money out of your bank, put some of your money into gold and freaking silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income. That's it for today. Please hit that like button.
All right. Well, Ed, you said it was the worst of economic times ahead and you weren't mucking around, hey?
We have everything going in exactly the wrong direction, right? Every metric you can think of, so our debt is getting bigger, our spending continues to grow, and at the same, and interest rates are going up. It's like the perfect storm.
It is.
When you consider that by the end of the year, just servicing the interest on our debt is going to exceed the cost of Social Security, and they predict by 2027, at this rate, that it's going to exceed the cost of our national defense, of our defense budget. And then by 2030, it's expected to be the largest line item on our budget, just serving the interest, not paying down our interest, just serving. And that assumes they do not introduce any more new programs along the way. What do you think the odds of that happening? So that's another. This financial system cannot be sustained. It is unsustainable. It must at some point fail. It has to. There's nothing they can do to bring the debt down to a meaningful level at this point. I mean, right now we're resorting to having to print more money just to keep up with stuff and issuing more debt. The exact thing we were talking about in yesterday's episode. So these people, again, it's that old debate, right? Whether this is just incompetence or whether this is by design. And arguments can be made on both ends of it, right?
Well, it's incompetently designed is what it is. And it's the systematic destruction. And you can see it's the willful destruction of the economy as well. Because if they were serious about solving this problem, they would have fixed the interest rates and they'd stop printing the money. It's really as simple as that. The only reason that inflation is where it is because there's too much money being printed. And the reason that the debt is so high is because you're running too many programs and you're spending too much money. Your outgoings are greater than your incoming. And the only solution that they have is to actually borrow more money on another credit card. But then when the interest comes home to roost on that, it's all over. It's just a house of cards. And surprisingly, in the little bit of synopsis that you give there in your timing, you say at 2030, it'll be the biggest line item on the budget. And when I listen to that, I think of Klaus Schwab saying by 2030, we'll have a great reset. You'll owe nothing and be happy. So that's actually where we're at. And that's assuming that there's no black swan event between now and then.
Right. Correct.
Meaning no nuclear war, no stock market crash, no housing crash, no commercial real estate housing crash. All of that is just an absolute disaster and a basket case waiting to happen as well. And the trigger might not necessarily be in the United States, because if the war escalates in Europe, then that's going to have some effect back home there for you guys in the US. And something else might happen. It might happen in Asia. It might happen in the Middle East. There's a series of black swan events that are on the horizon that we talk about every other day. And that's the end of the economy as you know it. And that's all they need. That's all the reason that these people in charge need to roll out central bank digital currencies and change the way the entire system works.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I can't say it better than that. That's right. This is we are on such thin ice that any black swan event, and there always is eventually a black swan event. And the nature of black swans is you can't predict them. You don't know when they're going to happen. You don't know which one it's going to be. That's why they call them black swan events. They're unpredictable, but they do have a nasty way of happening from time to time, and they come out of the blue. And we do our best to try to identify the potential black swans, and then, give people some strategies to prepare for those events. Because listen. If you're paying attention and if you're prepared, if you take the right steps, not only do you not have to be a victim of the upcoming events, you can take advantage of it. There's always a way to make money on bad situations, right? Most people don't know how to do it, but the smart money does. So we try to give people the inside scoop about how they can be part of the smart money crowd.
Yeah, that's bang on. One of the things I was looking at yesterday was how does a social credit score affect us and what will happen? So you already have a social credit score already in some ways. If you try and get a loan from the bank for a mortgage or something like that, they look at your credit score, and your credit score is a version of a social credit score. Have you been a good person? Have you paid your bills? You're not behind on anything. You haven't had any defaults. There's a series of things that are already there in the financial system. And when the government brings out a central bank digital currency and brings all of these things together, the way that they're going to enforce it is by charging you more money. So if they've plugged into your car and you've driven too far this week and you've filled up with 3 tanks of petrol, and then they go, no, you can only have 1 tank of petrol per week, then they're going to charge you more money. It's going to cost you more money to do something. And because they control the currency, all that is just another form of tax. And when I think about Sydney and this place, you ask me about Sydney all the time, Ed. Sydney is the most taxed place on planet Earth. I can't go out the front door. I used to say I can't go out the front door without spending $20, no matter what I'm doing. But now I'd say I can't go out the front door without spending $50 because petrol prices are so high. The tolls on the roads to drive on the roads that have been paid for long ago are really incredibly high. Everywhere you go, you have to pay for parking. If I want to buy a cup of coffee, it's like $6 or $7. It's ridiculous. Everywhere I go, I have to pay for something. And then when I have to put petrol in my car, but I put fuel in the car, and the fuel that goes in the car has a tax associated with it called fuel excise. I drive on the road, and in order to drive on any road with no toll, I have to register my car and pay for an insurance here in Australia called a green slip. So that's those two things, car registration and a green slip, are a form of tax because I can drive my vehicle without those things. But if I get caught with all of the cameras around town, which look at your number plate and use OCR to actually see if you're a naughty boy with driving around without a rego or a green slip, you're going to get pinged and you get a fine, which is another form of tax. And then when I drive across the harbour bridge, I have to pay a toll. And when I come back from the harbour other side, from north to south, I have to pay another toll. And I'm like, really? I keep paying tolls at every turn I'm going, and everywhere I go to use the government facilities that are paid for by the councils that we all live in, because every person that lives somewhere in Australia pays land rates to their council, and the land rates are for roads and to look after the local area at that local level, because that's the best way to administer it. But I'm still paying, even though I'm paying. So I'm paying twice or three times, sometimes 4 or 5 times for the same facilities. And all of that says to me that the government just doesn't know how to manage an economy. Because if it was truly managed, all of the infrastructure would be, if I go to Dubai and drive around on the roads there, do I have to pay tolls? No. I might have to pay a toll here and there, but not the same way that you have to pay tolls in America or in Australia. It's just ridiculous. And the more that we move the closer we move towards the systematic destruction of the financial system, the more of this we're going to see. Because now they're going to start taxing me more on food because I'm not allowed to eat meat. They're going to start taxing me more on alcohol. You shouldn't be drinking alcohol. They're going to get rid of cigarettes altogether. They're going to do all sorts of things that are going to encroach into my personal freedoms and take more and more of my money away from me. So there's a theory out there that they take cash away from you because every time you tap your card, there's a percentage of that goes to the bank. So Andrew Tate described it really well in his interview the other day. And Tucker Carlson asked, what do you think about getting rid of cash? And he said, well, if you give $50 to some guy for an exchange, he takes that piece of paper and gives it to someone else, and it's still $50. And you give it again, keep giving it, and it's still $50. But if he says it's $50 for you and you tap your card, there's a percentage of that goes to the bank. And then he taps his card, there's a percentage of that goes to the bank. Then again and again and again. But that surcharge goes on top of that $50 that you're paying. So it's actually a form of tax, and it's diminishing the actual value of your bank account as you go every time you tap your card because it's not anonymous and they're controlling everything that you do. So the tax man is definitely coming for you. They're already there at scale, but they're coming for you even more in the systematic destruction of this economy. It's ridiculous, man. It is the beginning of the end. I really believe that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up taxes because that's one thing that I wanted to talk about in my segment, but I wanted to keep my segment short and pithy, and I was sure that we would talk about it during the discussion phase. Now, we saw that tax receipts now are at an all-time low, okay? Now, if you actually have a healthy economy, tax receipts should be up, right? So this is just one of those signs that they're lying to you with the government statistics. Our economy is not strong. And we see that with record low revenue income from through the tax system. Well, this is why I promise you, the IRS is gearing up big time to come after us, man. With this new legislation they passed last year, the IRS now has an additional 80,000 agents. And we do not have that many billionaires. So they're not going after the billionaires. Besides which, the billionaires know how to hide their money, legally, but they know how to avoid the tax system.
Wasn't that 80,000 people put on hold till next year?
Oh, you know what? Maybe you're right on that. But
it's been deferred. They haven't got rid of it. So everything you're saying is still valid. Just been deferred.
It hasn't been deferred. Yeah. But the point is that they want to come after us. They're doing, they're chomping at the bit to go after all, and they want to wring every possible nickel out of us through taxes. There are new taxes coming. I mean, a lot of the taxes that are put on us are, they're subtle taxes, right? They tax us here, they're not official taxes, except that they appear, when you go to fill up your car, when you go to buy things, you are taxed. And it's an insidious, this is one day soon, we're probably going to do a segment on, well, maybe we shouldn't do a segment on the IRS. I don't want to be canceled. But
I was having a conversation yesterday about a new business that I'm working on and we're setting up, and working with one of my mates, and we were talking about, this will make a lot of money. We'll have to pay a lot of tax. And I said, no, man, we're not paying any tax here in Australia. What we'll do is we'll go to Singapore and we'll set up a company over in Singapore for $7,000 or $8,000. And we'll set up multiple entities in Singapore, right? So it's almost like racketeering, but it's completely legal, right? So we have the core business, and then what we do is have the brand, and then we have the IT, and then we have some IP. So there's 4 entities that are sitting there. And the main entity is the one with the working capital and what actually happens. So the reason I want to go and set up in Singapore and make that happen, here in Australia, I earn revenue, and then I have expenses, outgoing costs, and whatever is left over, I pay taxes on. So the business that we're designing and that we're going to launch is we hardly have any overheads. We don't need an office. We don't need staff. We just need freelancers to do it with. So they're all contractors. So they're not on our books, and those contractors are all offshore anyway. So we don't need to worry about those rules and regulations here in Australia. We get an invoice, we pay the invoice. So I don't have to pay as you go tax, PAYG tax, or superannuation to the people that I employ, because those people are offshore because the rules here in Australia are too restrictive for me. I would rather pay that guy over in India or America or South America or in Europe 35 or 50 bucks US an hour. I'd rather pay them 50 bucks US an hour than pay somebody here 35 bucks an hour, because then I have to collect the PAYG and give it to the government. Then I have to add super on top of that to pay for our version of 401k, which is called super. And there's just all these other things that go with it as well. And then I need insurance, and on and on and on. It just goes on forever. It never ends. And then if I earn 100,000 bucks in a month and I've got to pay 30% company tax when it's all said and done, I've got to give the government $30,000 a month. I'm like, what? In Singapore, I can pay a flat rate tax of 15% company tax. And if I know my numbers in advance, which I do with this business because I can tell what's happening with this business, I can pay my taxes in advance and it lowers it to 12%. So assuming that I can't pay my numbers, or I don't know my numbers right and I don't pay in advance, I'm getting a 15% company tax rate there in Singapore, but versus a 30% company tax rate here in Australia. Why on earth would I ever set up there? And then when I'm going from one company to another, because the branding lives in one company and the IT lives in another and the IP lives in another, and we license all of that back to the main organization the way that that's actually set up, then I can just lower my expenses to virtually zero because I'm just distributing the money to those other places. All I'm doing is I'm moving my tax obligation into those other entities, but because the amount of money that they earn is considerably less, I can diversify my risk across those different things. And if something happens to my main business, that goes away for whatever reason, I can just start another company because I just license the IP from those other businesses there. So here in Australia, I could do the same thing. And, is it a form of racketeering? Well, I don't know. It depends on your perspective. Depends if you write the contract correctly and it's legally binding that, I must pay a licensing fee to use that brand of X amount of dollars per month. And that's a contract that goes on in perpetuity, starts at 5 years and rolls every 12 months unless specifically pulled out, right? So it's all just legal jargon and bullshit, really. It's a giant circle jerk is the way you look at it in reality. But why would I ever do something like that in Australia when I could get literally 15% more revenue? So if you think about it, at just use an arbitrary number of 100 grand a month, why would I set up a company here in Australia if I have to pay imagine what you could do in your business with $15,000 a month. Imagine if you go into your marketing budget and your overhead and hiring more people, and there's a whole series of things that you can do. But I'm just not incentivized to set up my business here in Australia as an Aussie. And I don't want to employ anybody here in Australia either, because it's just too expensive and it's too much of a risk. And now, not to mention, so here's the unspoken truth as well, Ed, and of an entrepreneur and how I feel. And I'm just going to say it out loud, and I'll die on this hill. I don't care. I'll be very reluctant to hire anybody in Australia. Very reluctant. And the reason I'm so reluctant to hire people in Australia, because all of these lefties are so triggered. And I feel like that I would just be exposed if I said the wrong thing. If I came to work and said, "Hey mate, how you going?" And they said, "Don't call me mate, call me they." I'd be like, what? I'm so touchy about all of this bullshit and all of this social garbage that the left has going on. And anybody from the left, anybody on the socialist side of politics wants higher taxes, because they want higher taxes so the government can collect that and distribute it in social welfare. But social welfare here in Australia is the largest line item on the Australian budget. Like, stop it. Stop it. Like, invite capitalism, invite people to do, Donald Trump had it right, man, when he said lower taxes. If you lowered my taxes by 10% here in Australia, I wouldn't go offshore to Singapore, or I wouldn't look abroad to Dubai, because I can look abroad to Dubai as well. And all of this is easy to do. I don't even have to leave this desk to do any of that. All I've got to do is transfer the money across to them. They'll set it up. They'll ring me a couple of days later. "Hey, Rob, here's the address. Here's the details. Here's how you trade. Your Singaporean bank account set up. Here's what we need to do. Here's your cards in the mail. And every time I tap my card that comes from a Singapore bank, the money goes out of Australia. Yeah? Or the money is coming from Singapore to Australia. And every time somebody buys something from me here in Australia, it goes offshore to Singapore. And is there a tax implication? Yes, I collect GST. There's your stupid GST. Piss off. Doesn't make a difference to me anyway. But the company tax that you're collecting from me is going to be fucking nada. Crazy, man. So that's one way you can get out of the system. That's what I'm doing to try and get out of this. Well, I'm still in the system. I'm still going to pay tax. I'll pay tax in Singapore or Dubai or somewhere else. But I'm going to do everything I can to avoid paying tax here in Australia. Because why would I give a cent to the socialist government that's in charge? Why would I?
Well, this is why the wealthy have a natural advantage over everyone else, because they have the resources to hire smart people to think of clever ways to do what you just did, right? So the wealthy. Some people say, one of my pet peeves is when I hear leftists use the phrase, "Oh, paying your fair share." The billionaires aren't paying their fair share.
Maybe you should pay your fair share on behalf of me.
Yeah, that's right. What's the stat? 48% of all Americans do not pay any taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So why aren't those people sending fruit baskets to all the billionaires every year?
That's a good question, man.
So instead of complaining about billionaires, you should be freaking thanking God for them.
There's a good investigative journalism documentary out there it's called the Panama Files. You might remember that, ladies and gentlemen, from a couple of years ago. It brought down all sorts of people. It brought down, what was his name? The Pakistani Prime Minister, Sharif. It got rid of him because he was found to be super corrupt. So what they were doing is exactly what I'm describing, where they set up a company offshore in a tax haven. And in this case, it was in Panama. And there was a lady in the front office. And this is the practical application of it. So these rich people would come in and say, okay, I need you to help me with my tax. And I've got $10 million that I need to offload that I don't want to pay any tax to. So they'd go to this accountancy firm and these lawyers in Panama, and the woman in the front office, whatever her name was, I can't remember. It's a funny story. She had no idea what she was doing. The boss would come in and go, okay, can you print these documents? Can you do that? And after you print the document, can you just sign it on the bottom of page 9, please? And she'd sign it on the bottom and hand it over like that. And what she was signing, she was saying that she was the director of all of these companies. And what would happen is, once all of the legal documents were in place, these rich people would send their money across to these companies. So they would set up multiple entities. So they would have their entity in their location. So in Pakistan, the president of Pakistan had his company, and he had all of the money in that company, and he sent it across to Panama. And when he sent it across to Panama then they would distribute it into a series of other companies. But what they would do is they wouldn't distribute it like, here's an invoice, pay the invoice. They'd say, Ed needs a loan. Here's a loan of $3 million, Ed. And the terms of that loan were, just pay it back when you're ready, man. It's good. Can't pay it back, just let me know and I'll write it off for you. Like that. So that's how they completely avoided tax. So that's known as racketeering, right? That's the Hunter Biden thing, where Hunter Biden is receiving millions of dollars from Burisma and the Chinese energy company and the Romanians, and he's doing all of this. He's getting paid for the influence of his dad. So the money is coming into a bank account, and then it's being distributed as loans to other companies and then being given to those people as loans. Because, imagine if I came along to you, Ed, and I said, hey man, can you just sign that document there for me? I set up an LLC. You're suddenly the director of it. And by the way, let me send you the card. Here's the Visa card in the mail for you. Go for it, man. Go nuts. You got 40 grand a month on that you can spend. Spend it on whatever you want, man. I don't care. And I never have to account for it. I never have to do anything. I never have to submit a tax return. I don't have to say what the money's been spent on, because I lent you that money. And when I lend you money, it's the same as winnings. You don't pay tax on winnings. If you go to the casino and win $10,000, you don't pay tax on it because you won it. You don't pay tax on the loan that you get as well. If I go to the bank right now and get a business loan for $100,000, there's no tax implication. The difference is I'm just giving you the business loan from my company to your company. And if you're not supplying me a service and I'm giving you a loan like that, that's okay. You're allowed to do that. But if I'm just moving the money to you and you're just tapping the card, that's racketeering. So you're not actually doing anything. And there's a very gray area between those things, because you could say, well, no, I was doing consultancy services and where are the invoices? Well, I could just dodge up the invoices and go, there you go, these are the invoices. No one would know, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, little clarification. Here in America, we do pay taxes on our casino earnings.
Oh, you do? So if you win in the casino, winning's not earnings. They're considered earnings, are they?
I forget.
If you win the lottery?
Lottery. Yeah, you pay a lot of tax. That's a big, that's a big scam. That's a big scandal right there.
That's government racketeering right there. Everyone puts some money into the scheme, and then the government just takes their little clip of it.
Yeah, if we did what the government does in terms of lotto, we would be in jail. It's a government-sanctioned scam, money grab by the government. But Elon Musk doesn't get a salary from any of his companies. So now the way he's made his billions is he takes his stock options, goes to the bank, and he gets a loan.
He borrows against them.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there's no tax implication on that either. How much money do I need to live? I need $3 million for my family this year. Here's $3 million worth of stock options. I anticipate that that's going to go up. That's how I'm going to pay for it. That's how you can clear that out at the end of the. All he's doing is using these stock as security. Yeah, but it's they're just paper assets.
Yeah, which is common for the C-suite executives. It's common. So the Bezos, same thing. Jeff Bezos, same thing. So, but the point to all of this is the economics, at least in the U.S., are going the wrong direction. Completely, whether it's mismanagement or whether this is by design, just know the effects are the same to you. The financial system is in dicey territory, and you better be aware of it, and you better start taking measures so that you're not a victim of it.
Look, I think just in this 10-minute conversation that we've had about how you can protect yourself in an offshore company, if you look into that, I promise you that it will open up a whole world of opportunity for you. And no matter what happens in the United States, if you're a resident there, if you're a resident of a country where the economy seems to be teetering on the edge, then if you've got protection in multiple different locations, it's like having multiple streams of passive recurring income. We bang on that all the time. And if you've got protection, like from a corporate perspective, then you can sleep well at night. And when you wake up in the morning and you see the stock markets crash because of a black swan event, you can rest assured that your funds are safe because they're not located in a bank that's got exposure to something like that. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that the cash flow that you've got won't stop because you've got multiple sources. Maybe you set up in Dubai, maybe you set up in Liechtenstein, maybe you set up in the Cayman Islands and also in Singapore and in Ireland. All of those places are very, very successful countries. And the reason they're successful is because of what we're talking about. They don't produce anything. Singapore doesn't produce anything. It's an island. You can walk from one end of it to the other in a couple of hours. It's tiny. The only thing that they produce is economic products, and they give you and me the opportunity to actually leverage those sorts of things. And most people just don't know about it. But if you take the time to learn about those things, you will find the unspoken truth behind it all.
Yeah, there are islands in the Caribbean whose entire GDP is based around providing that particular service, right?
Well, they can't do anything else, can they? Because they simply don't produce anything. They don't have the landmass. They don't have the population, and there's nothing for them to produce other than tourism. But that's not going to get you very far because there's not that many people that want to go there. And even if there was, you can't house that many people. So, they've got to do something. That's the way it works. It's good. It's interesting.
I mean, hey, look, they're a sovereign nation. So, listen, we have Indian reservations in America who do the exact same thing. They act as havens for people. Sure.
It's smart. It's very, very smart.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, it's an example of people prospering in difficult times. Ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap this one up. Hopefully you got something out of that. Hopefully you saw a little bit of the unspoken truth behind the mainstream story and what's happening. And make sure you do something about that to protect yourself, reduce your exposure to the banks, get some gold and silver and create some passive recurring income for yourself. And maybe just open the door to looking overseas somewhere else to one of those tax havens to see what that would mean to you and to your business and to your life and to your family. It's worthwhile investigating, if for no other reason than just to actually know that it exists, because it's pretty interesting to learn about how other systems work and other opportunities in the world. And you get to see how the other half actually live as well is the way that I like to describe it. Folks, don't forget we're available on Telegram and also as a podcast. And come on over to Twitter and please engage with us there. All of the links are down below in the description. Ed, let's wrap this one up and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.
All right.